بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We hope and we pray that everyone is doing well, inshallah ta'ala. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we are continuing with Usul al-Tafsir, which are the foundations of the science of tafsir, and we're at a section which is translating the Quran. And so this discussion, inshallah ta'ala, is about the permissibility of it, the different types of translations, what are some of the conditions or some of the limitations of translations, at what extent can we use a translation of the Quran, what is it to be used for, etc., etc. So that's with regards to translating the Quran, with regards to translations. So with regards to translations, we have two potential types. And we say potential because only one of them is actually permissible. But the first of the potential types of translations that we can have is a literal translation, which is translating every single word for word of the Quran. The second one would be translation of the meaning, meaning the overall meaning of the verse or the sentence without regards to the individual words. Okay, so the first one is a literal translation as close as possible, or not as close as possible, it's a literal translation, it's not as close as possible. The meaning is the one that's as close as possible. But every single word is accounted for, their exact matches, etc. So the question is literal, the first type, is that a possibility? Is it possible to have such a translation? First off, there are scholars, extreme minority in fact, and I haven't found any legitimacy to even what they say, who say that it's permissible, but there's a response to them. So it's actually not permissible. And what are these arguments? So with regards to literal translations, they say if you want to do a literal translation, you want to do it word for word exactly as it is, it has to adhere to the following conditions in order for it to be a correct literal translation, word for word. They put three conditions. Condition number one, you have to have the exact words that mean the same thing in both languages, where even the breadth of meaning is covered. So what's an example of this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Maliki yawm ad-din. Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? This doesn't need a lot of, we all know this verse. Malik means owner. We're not going to get into even the potential different qira'at, where there's a qira'at that says Malik, king. We say Malik, the owner. Yawm ad-din. What's Yawm ad-din? It's Yawm al-Qiyamah. But, how would we translate the word ad-din? What do we usually translate it as? The day of judgment. But is deen judgment? What would be a better word for judgment? Hisab. Right? Hisab. But that's even account. The day of accountability. Sah? So Yawm ad-din, you understand now, if we would translate Yawm ad-din exactly, we would have to translate that word ad-din. And the word ad-din has a breadth of meaning. First off, ad-din, inna ad-dina inda Allah al-Islam. Ad-din, what's ad-din? The religion. But on Yawm ad-din, what's Yawm ad-din? The day of judgment. But how does that work? If it's the religion, it's the day of the religion, what is it? Ad-din huna بمعنى وهي موجودة, it's كما تدين تدان. As you do, so will be done to you. Meaning it's يوم الحساب. It's ad-din, الوفاء أو الحساب. Okay? Yeah, exactly. Not dain. Dain is from that. Dain, which is a debt, it has the same root, by the way. Okay? And so that's where the meaning actually comes from. Does that make sense? So we can't actually... So how do you translate that word ad-din? Because it does cover religion, it does cover a lot of these things, and it entails all of that while the reciter is reciting it. So there's no way that you can cover number one. And we just showed a simple one, a simple example of that. Does that make sense? There's problems all over the board. And you open up a translation, do you use the word Allah or do you use the word God even? Right? Can the word God ever cover what the word Allah means? We know that. You understand what we're saying here? So, number one is just from these simple examples, we see that it's almost impossible to cover in this slide. طيب. Number two, both languages have to have the linguistic tools and techniques that are identical as well. When we talk about linguistic tools and techniques, these are called al-adawat al-lughawiyya, the tools that are used in the language that are not necessarily in words. Like the hamza, hamzatul istifham, or adatul istifham, or adat al-ta'ajjub, or adat al-nida, things to call, ya ayyuha. Ya ayyuha doesn't exist in any language. We just say, oh, you who believe, but ya is oh you, and then what's ayyuha? You understand it becomes problematic. Or adatul istifham, a anta qulta linnas, did you say, and then there's problems obviously there as well. And of course linguistic techniques that are used in both languages, they have to be identical, and this doesn't exist in any two languages aslan. Number three, you have to preserve the order of the words in both languages without it affecting the meaning. This is where Arabic really so in number one, Arabic, we showed that it actually transcends a lot of other languages. Because a one word in Arabic can have multiple meanings. Where words in English, they usually only have one or two meanings. صح? But a word in Arabic has a multitude of meanings. And an example of this, we said translating the word Allah, or even in the Basmala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Translate ar-Rahman or ar-Rahim. Yeah, but most gracious is actually, this is problematic. Gracious is ash-shakur. Yeah, it's not necessarily ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman has no equivalent in English. There's no way to translate it because it's on the wazn fi'lan or fa'lan. And the wazn fa'lan is unique in all of Allah's names, is that it's only for sifat ar-Rahman here, ar-Rahman. There's no equivalent to this aslan in English. There's no way for you to translate a word like that in the wazn and all these things. Right, but it's part of who He is. Ar-Rahman means it's integral. It's part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who He is. And it's inseparable. Does it make sense? There's no way to remove, it's always there, it's constant, etc. Ar-Rahim, you have Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahma, both of them. But now Ar-Rahim, the more specifically, so they translate as the entirely merciful, the specifically merciful. But there's limitations even there, and it's not completely giving it justice as to the Arabic word and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Himself. Which is why we can never, this shows us limitations on twofold. Number one, we can never describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better than He described Himself in the Arabic language even. And of course, therefore the English is always going to come short in describing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always is, or is Himself, Azza wa Jal. Okay? And number three, the order of the words, Arabic also has a superiority in that, and this is over English, just as using English as a bedrock. English, you're dictated through the order of the words to assign which is the subject, which is the object. It goes subject, verb, object, right? You can have little variations here and there, but ultimately you have to follow a certain order, otherwise you change the meaning. But in Arabic, changing the order does not change the meaning. It changes the emphasis and not the meaning. التقديم والتأخير في العربية, تقديم and تأخير, this is where I change the order, it does not affect the meaning. Why? Because الفاعل والفعل والمفعول به is dictated through what? Through the marcation mark at the end, the vowel marking, the tashkil في الإعراب. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ. And when Ibrahim was tested by his Lord. But it actually, the order isn't necessarily the common order. If you read it in order and you just change the demarcation marks, it would say, and when Ibrahim tested his Lord. But it actually, that's the order that it actually says. But because of the demarcation marks, we actually understand it as, and when Allah tested Ibrahim. But why did He put Ibrahim before Allah? To show the emphasis that the test was for Ibrahim alayhi salam. Because he's the focus. So Arabic order dictates focus, what we are focusing on, and not who is doing what to who. Does that make sense? But in English, you can't convey that meaning. The order dictates who's doing what to who, and the emphasis comes later on in adding other words and more on. And so Arabic and the Quran is beautiful in that it's concise, it's brief, and in that brevity, in one verse, it can convey a ton of meaning just through the order of the words. And we got so much meaning just through the order. This is why, for example, going back to Surah Al-Fatiha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. He starts with إِيَّاك, the object is first. Not the verb, not the subject. نستعين, نعبد, and نستعين are both يعني us and even يعني الفاعل محذوف. الفاعل here in إياك نعبد, just to give you guys an example. إياك is the object, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started the verse with the object. Then it goes the verb, and then who's doing the verb is not even there. It's as if you're not even important compared to what you're supposed to be doing. So it says إياك نعبد. You alone we worship. And this is in Arabic, why? To show the emphasis on who it is we worship. And this way there's no way for us to ever infer that there's someone more besides Allah to worship. That means it only stops there. And it conveys all of that meaning in 2 words. There's no way to do this in English. And this is why any literal translation is impossible. You understand now what we're saying? We can't convey that in the same amount of words, in that same order, in that same fashion, using the same amount of vocabulary. Okay? These are just some examples to emphasize how important it is and how amazing it is, the Arabic, and how important it is to actually try to strive, inshallah ta'ala, to learn that Arabic and to see what it is that's actually being done in these verses. Okay? So we have to also preserve the order of the words without it affecting the meaning. The order of the words in the Quran, does it, so let's say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala counts a certain amount of things. Does it affect us? Yes, it does. And in fact, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, أَبْدَأُ بِمَا بَدَأَ اللَّهُ بِهِ. When he says, I'm going to go to Hajj, and he wanted to do sa'i between Safa and Marwa, what did he say? He says, I'm going to start with that which Allah started. So I'm going to start with the Safa and then I'm going to go to Al-Marwa, not the opposite. You don't start from one and not the other. Which tells us that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in saying this statement, is telling us that if Allah started with a certain thing and He starts counting, that whatever He starts with has some sort of importance. So the order has to be preserved, and we can't, a lot of times, there's a limitation in how we do that. In the verse that talks about wudu, which is an amazing verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha qumtum ila salati, O you who have believed, if you stand up for your salah, then number 1, do what? It says, فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. Wash your face. This is what he starts with, right? وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. He says, wipe on your heads, and then your feet to the ka'bayn, to the ankles. Okay? Yeah, to your heels, above the heel, to the ka'bayn is the... So he says, here's the issue. The tashkeel on arjulakum, because it's a fatha, we know that it goes back to which verb? Does it go back to ghusl or does it go back to masah? If it goes back to masah, that means that you can wipe on your foot. You don't have to wash it. But if it goes back to al-ghusl, to washing, that means you have to wash. And the tashkeel, because it's a fatha, it does not say bi ru'usikum wamsahu bi. That ba would entail that I would have to have a kasra. But because it has a fatha, we know that it goes back to washing. But because the order is off, that means he put something mamsuha, something that's wiped, between things, objects that are washed. We understand that the order is important, and this is why the majority of scholars say that the order of how you do the body parts in wudu is mandatory because of the way that the verse is phrased. There's no way to convey this meaning in any other language. At least not that I know of. Yeah.
But there's another recitation, Arjulikum.
Naam. Which they add, yani they say that this qira'ah aslan, yani how do we apply them is that you can do masih al-khuffayn and so forth. Does that make sense? Yeah. But the standard qira'ah, yani and in fact, yani most of the qira'at do add the fatha on arjulikum or arjulakum. Okay? Make sense so far? I hope I haven't lost anybody yet. So all of these show yani, the emphasis that preserving the order is actually important in Islam, because otherwise there's no way for us to understand that order is important in wudu unless we had a way to say it in this way without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually specifying it. Okay? طيب. Here is a thing that happens. What if we can find this in a verse or in a part of a verse? Meaning, let's say I find a part of a verse that I can, in fact, translate it literally. If I find, for example, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ. Indeed, Allah commands justice. I did it in 4 words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it in Arabic in 4 words. And I said, Inna, indeed. Allah, God, I said, for example. Ya'mur commands. Al-adl, bil-adl, with justice. Yani with, you can say with. You understand what we're saying here. Is it allowed at that point? No. Yani we can translate it this way, but we're still doing what type of translation? We're doing translation of meaning, not literal. Even if we do find a part that matches, right? This doesn't mean that it's actually still literal. It's not literal. Yeah. No, it's not literal though. What we're saying is it's not literal in this case. And even though we found every word and its equivalent, are they true equivalents? Is inna indeed? No. Is Allah God? No. Commands ya'mur? Okay. Maybe. Be with? Maybe. You understand what we're saying? It's still not along those same lines. Even if we find something close, it will never be 100% there because of these limitations. Naam? Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're gonna discuss this here in a second as well. I mean, it's allowed to do that. Yeah, maybe I need to find a better wording for this. Because in the book, in the Arabic, he says, هل هو جائز? And he says, no, غير جائز. But he says, غير جائز للترجمة الحرفية. Even though we're trying to do it, he says it's still not allowed to do literal translation, even though we find parts. We wouldn't be able to call it that. It's still a translation of the meaning. طيب. Translation of the meaning. This is where we translate the meaning of the verse into the new language. Is this allowed?
Yes.
What is the ruling on this? ما هو حكمها?
I think it should be allowed.
Halal.
I think so. Otherwise, would it be yeah, how
Would it be? Could we elevate it to mustahab?
Of course.
Could we elevate it to wajib?
Yes. Yes. It's just a way for us to explain our faith to them.
So ما حكمها?
Wajib.
He's saying wajib. Yes. It is actually wajib. By default, translating the meaning is allowed. Okay, is akin to explaining the Quran in Arabic. كأنك تفسر القرآن. It's like you're explaining the Quran, but now you're just explaining it in a different language. That's what we mean by in a translation of the meaning. صح? But if a person does not understand the Arabic at all, what is the ruling then for then translating the Quran? No, if a person does not understand Arabic, what is the ruling for translating this, translating the meaning? Not the translating the whole Quran, translating the meaning.
Well, he doesn't know, he can't speak Arabic, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't know the Quran.
Yeah, it becomes wajib. It becomes wajib to translate the meaning of the Quran, not the literal. We're not talking about the literal translation, but the meaning of Quran. Why? Because understanding the Quran is mandatory. وَمَا لَا يَتِمُّ الْوَاجِبُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ وَاجِب.
Why do you say first kifaya? Just to avoid wajib being on every single.
No. You don't have to translate. I don't have to translate. But us using a translation to convey, right? Or translating the meanings or explaining the Quran to somebody becomes wajib, yes. Meaning wajib in the sense, I agree with you, fard kifaya, in the sense of the da'wah, the greater da'wah, yes. But for that individual, he has to understand the Quran. Or as much as possible, yani from the Quran. Obviously, he's not going to understand the whole thing, right? But especially Surah Al-Fatiha, I think it's a travesty when we have people who recite Surah Al-Fatiha day in and day out and they don't know what it means.
So it's wajib upon the one who doesn't understand Arabic,
Yes.
upon the one who's translating. I just want to distinguish between the two. I got confused.
A person who is translating what? No, ihna, as an individual, let's say, what is the ruling? Let's rewind a little bit. What's the ruling aslan on da'wah? Fard kifaya. No, some even say on an individual basis, كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. We all have a da'wah within our capacity, within whatever our responsibility is.
Is it really fard kifaya?
No. What I'm saying is, I'm saying, كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. All of you have a responsibility to those that you can actually convey to, even if it's one person. بلغوا عني ولو آية.
One person is enough.
Mash, that's it. صح? So from this perspective, I do agree that it's actually fard ayn on everybody to do da'wah within their capacity. But in the da'wah, in the sense that we talk about, going out and conveying to non-Muslims and talking to them, might be fardun ala al-kifaya, because you have to have certain conditions and requirements available in that individual to be able to convey properly. Does that make sense? So it becomes mandatory upon us as Muslims, yes, to translate the Quran to those who do not understand the Arabic. Without a doubt. To translate, now what we're talking about is translations of the meanings. That's why the header here is translation of the meaning. We're not talking about the literal translation, we're talking about translation of the meanings. By the way, this is the same fiqh of the ruling on the khutbah on the day of Friday. The asl is what? That the khutbah is in what language? In Arabic. But if the whole point of the khutbah is to convey a certain message to the people and they will not understand it if it's delivered in Arabic, then it's wajib to deliver it in the language that the people understand. Does that make sense? This is why always the verses we will still recite them in Arabic, because that can't aslan, the meaning of that Arabic, you cannot aslan imitate it. It's inimitable, like they say. It's there. If you understand that Arabic, that's great. But now, because the whole purpose of the khutbah is to deliver a message, this is why the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to give the khutbah, كَانَ يَحْمَرْ وَجْهُ, his face used to get red, and he used to warn the people as if he's warning them of an army that's marching upon them. يَقُولُ صَبَّحَكُمْ مَسَّاكُمْ. He says that it might come in the morning, it might come in the evening, etc. All of this is to tell us, if the point of the khutbah was just to stand up and just do any dhikr, and no understanding needed, the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have reacted or interacted in the way that he did. But the fact that he did, that means he was conveying a message, which tells us that the purpose of the khutbah is to convey a certain message with the people, and therefore if that can only be conveyed through a translation into a different language, then that is the ruling upon that. Makes sense? طيب, we have some limitations within translations of the meaning, meaning translations of the meaning of the Quran. What are some of these limitations? Number one, that it's not to be a substitute for the Quran itself, which is in Arabic, of course. So if I have a translation of the meanings, this does not mean that I can substitute that for the actual Quran. It's never a substitute. It's only assisting me to understand what's being said. But I can't use it as a substitute. For example, can I use it in my salah? I cannot. A friend of mine, he said that we were in a masjid in Las Vegas. And of course, that might be his first problem. Right now, you know that there's 7 masajid in Las Vegas. Yeah. I've prayed in 2 of them. But there are 7. A brother of ours, a very trustworthy brother, he says he went to a masjid that was brand new. And this was their first day opening it up over there. And he went. And he wanted to go and pray. And as soon as they lined up, one brother, he went ahead. He wanted to be the imam. And then he puts his hands up and he says, God is great. In the name of God was great, He's most merciful. And he starts reciting in English like this. Everybody, and almost, they said that there were maybe 15 people there. Everybody started looking at each other like, what is this? Except for 2 people. The imam and 2 other people bas. And everybody's like, whoa, this isn't salah. What are you doing here? They came back and they said, no, 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 no. Those guys didn't budge. They kept on doing their thing. They said, no, 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 we're going to pray actual salah. They went back and they did their salah bil-lugha al-Arabiyyah. They did their salah in Arabic.
What if a person doesn't speak Arabic? What do they do in their salah?
Whatever they can. Even if they're quiet. But I would never substitute the English translation for what they recite. Even if, and we've asked many of our mashayikh, they said even if he just says Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, even if he can, and a lot of times you can do that, or even if he holds a paper and reads from it the transliteration, that's fine, right? But we should never, I don't think it's permissible to ever allow it in a different language, because then it becomes a crux, and then you go into bigger issues and bigger problems from there on. Naam?
Change it over time.
Yeah, exactly, and you can't. Even Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he has a fatwa in which he used to allow people, and he used to give them a time limit. One of the narration I think says a week, and some says 2 weeks, that he allowed them to recite it in Farisiyya, but then in 2 weeks they have to convert it over to Arabic. Later on in his life, he recanted that whole fatwa. He said no. Even if it's a brand new person, the first day, if he can't do it in Arabic, a dhikr will suffice. If he just stands there, in the salah, in the jama'ah, and he's behind the imam, aslan, if you're standing behind the imam, do you have to recite anything at all? You don't have to say anything. Because the recitation of the imam is a recitation for the ma'moom. So even if you're silent the entire salah, your salah is completely 100% accepted. Correct? And so he says as long as he's attending the salah with us, khalas. And then he can learn it over time. And it does take time for some people. Some people get it within days. Some people it might take them weeks. Some people it might take them months. But I think we should be easy on people, and we shouldn't force them to be completely rigid in this. And that we should not, and a lot of times when we teach non-Muslims about salah, we focus more on the mechanics of the salah than we do on the actual spiritual khushu' of the salah. Right? And that's the whole purpose of the salah and the point of the salah. And so we tell them, look, what you need to be focusing on is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting khushu', getting iman, and so on and so forth. The words, they'll come. I wouldn't worry about those in the beginning. Worry more about your communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is it that you're asking for? Your dua, by the way, can be in any language. Your dua that you make, if you're making a dua in the salah, that can be in any language. That's not a problem. Okay? طيب. So, point number one, limitation number one is it's never a substitute for the Quran itself, which is always why whenever we can quote the verse in the Arabic language, the actual verse, this is best. This is why we will continue doing this in the khutab, in the durus, and whatever, because there's no replacement for that whatsoever. Okay? Why can't it be a substitute? Like we said, there's a variety of meanings. There's a variety of reasonings. The breadth of the meaning of the words, us sometimes missing some points. There's no way for us to be comprehensive about all understanding of a certain verse. There's no way to do this. Any book of tafsir will always have limitations. No mufassir will ever tell you, I have complete knowledge of one verse, this verse. Nobody will ever say that. And so if we can't even say that in tafsir, how can we say that in a translation? There's no way that a translation can ever encompass everything there is to know about a single verse. The Quran is inimitable, meaning we cannot copy it. We cannot do something like it. Sah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even says this about the Quran in Arabic. If we were to come up with something like it in Arabic, if all of mankind were to do that, we can't do that in the Arabic, let alone come up with a translation that aslan will come short because it's being translated into another language and whatnot. The order of the words giving importance, the historical context being lost, etc., etc. Okay? Number two, and this a lot of times is an underestimated point, which is the effect of the Quran upon the listener is completely lost when translated. There's no substitute for the recitation. Even hearing the Quran, even if you don't understand what it is that's being recited, does it have effect? Of course it has an effect. That can't be translated. Tell me if you can translate a recitation. When a person recites the Quran, tartil and tajweed and all these things. There's no translation for that at all. And that, wallahi, you'd be surprised. A non-Muslim hears that and he's like, what is this that you're listening to? I remember one time me and a friend of mine, we, this is back when CDs were all the rage, of course. We had a CD, this was 2005. And so, what's his name, Al-Afasi, his CDs came out brand new. Yani his CD, his recording of the Quran, the one that is very famous now, came out in 2004. So this was like a year later, he was all the rage, everybody was listening to him, it was amazing, beautiful, etc. So he had it on in his car, a friend of mine, I'm in the car. And we go and we pick up a Christian Arab friend of ours. He's Arab, but he's Christian. But he used to hang out with us as Muslims, because he used to say, like, you know what I mean, you guys are well behaved, you're not going out doing, you know, weird things and all these things, and he liked our company. So he used to hang out with us. So he comes in the car, and my friend forgets that the Quran is playing, you know what I mean? The guy comes in and says, oh, I'm sorry. And he turns it off. And then I was like, wait, what was that? What were you listening to? So he was Quran, he's like, man, it's amazing. Could you put it on again? He says, yeah, sure. He listens, and wallahi, just 2-3 minutes in, he's like, can I have this CD? He's like, what do you want with it? It's the Quran. He's like, I don't care. He's like, I want to listen to it in my own car. He took it, and then he ended up listening to Quran almost, I can tell you, on a daily basis, even though he was Christian. And he was an international student. He went back. I've been in contact with him on and off. One of the things that he ended up saying, he's like, if it weren't for me hanging out with you guys, you Muslims, I would have been lost. I would have done so many crazy things. I would have been lost, number one. He said, number two, I don't want to marry another Christian lady. I want to marry a Muslim lady. I wish I recorded him so that I can have some Muslim men listen to this. When they say, Sheikh, I met this girl, she's Christian, but I want to marry her. I want to show them how this Christian man actually said, I would rather any day of the year marry a Muslim woman than marry a Christian woman. And we asked him why. He says, because your woman, you know that she's pure, you know that she's going to be loyal, she's going to be nice, she's going to be this, she's going to be this. He knew that. And then number three, my friend, after a while, he told him straight up, he's like, why don't you become Muslim? Because you know that you can't marry a Muslim girl unless you become Muslim. He's like, if my dad wasn't a priest back in his home country, he's like, I would have converted a long time ago.
Was it from Jordan?
Yeah, his dad was a priest, and then he's over there. He's like, they'll put a bounty on his head. Something will happen to him. So he's like, if it weren't for that, I probably would have converted a long time ago. Okay. But that's I'm mentioning this story. All of us have heard stories of the effect of the Quran that it has on a listener, even if they don't understand it, they don't speak it. That has an effect. Right? And this is part of the miraculous nature of the Quran. I know there's many other things that we can say about the miraculous nature of the Quran. طيب. More points on translations of the meaning. One of the conditions is that the person doing the translation has to know the meanings and the consequences, tabi'at or dala'il, okay, of the words in both languages, especially in the contexts. You can't just translate it looking up in a dictionary and then saying, okay, this is the word, okay, I'll write it. Without understanding, is this word a sensitive word in the language that you're translating to? Because if you're not a native speaker, you won't know if this word is a sensitive word or not. You won't know what effect it has upon the reader. So that means that you have to understand the culture. Not only, you can find the word, we have to understand the culture and the effect of the word that it has upon the reader in that language that you're translating to. Which is why a lot of times translations that are done by non-native speakers of the language that they're translating into will come short. Translations done by non-native speakers. So let's say the person is trying to translate into English. If that person is not a native speaker of English, it's always going to come short. It's going to have some issues. Okay? So that's another limitation. Number 4, that the person has enough religious knowledge to properly translate, especially the legislative meanings and the connotations of the verses. Right? We talked about, for example, the word salah in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مَاتَ مِنْهُمْ أَبَدًا. Right? He says, and do not pray, لَا تُصَلِّ, upon any of them who dies, meaning the hypocrites. What salah here is meant? Janazah. طيب, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then in another verse, when He says about the sadaqah that is given, right, and after the people give it, He says, وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ إِنَّ صَلَاتَكَ سَكَنٌ لَهُمْ. And pray upon them, indeed your prayer for them is a second, it's a peace, it's a form of tranquility. What's the second salah? Is it janazah? They didn't die for it to be janazah, right? They're still alive because they just gave charity. It's dua, yes. As-salah here is actually its linguistic meaning. The linguistic meaning of the word salah is actually dua, the supplication when we raise our hands. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ used to say, Allahumma salli ala yani fulan wa ali fulan. He says, oh Allah, yani, put salah, which is the blessings, Allah remembering them, etc., upon so and so and his family. Okay? So we have to understand the legislative meanings, not just the linguistic meanings. Because if we translate it linguistically, it means just pray for them, or pray upon them, or pray for, but in translating it through the meaning, we have to understand, okay, this one is salat al-janazah, this one is a dua, this one is etc. Aqim as-salah, that one is the 5 daily prayers. You understand. And this is all understood through context and through religious knowledge that the person has to have. Number 5 is that it is only accepted from someone whom we trust religiously and their character, meaning it's akin to accepting other religious knowledge. Okay? So when looking at translations, we do have to look at the character of the person who's translating, without a doubt. If the person's aqeedah, the person's belief is off. There's a lot of translations now that are in the market that are Ahmadiyya, for example. There's some things that are going to be off inside of there. They're going to be misinterpreted to follow their certain belief, right? They're going to be Shia translations that are going to be translated in a certain way that reflect their beliefs. Right? Like where it says about Idris, alayhi salam. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Maryam, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. And we raised him a high place. But they say, no, here, Aliyya means the person Ali. That Idris is now joining with Ali somewhere up in the heavens. This doesn't, You understand what I'm saying here, right? These are there, these are not, I know we're laughing about it, but you'll find them in the translations. They'll try to, put little things here, or there, or wherever they can, to abide by the meaning that they're trying to, push. Okay? Yeah.
Can you say Salli ala some of the righteous people? I thought it's reserved only for the Prophet.
Aha, good question. So can you say salah upon a certain person, or can you not? So with regards to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah commands him in the Quran to do that to people, especially the people who used to give sadaqat. خذ من أموالهم صدقة تطهرهم وتزكيهم بها وصل عليهم إن صلاتك سكن لهم. It says, take from their wealth a sadaqah in which you purify them, you beautify them, and then make dua for them. Okay? So here it's a command to Prophet Muhammad saying this. As far as us, we are commanded in the Quran to send it upon the Prophet ﷺ. Now, they said that you can add others after the Prophet ﷺ. This is why, for example, you say, Allahumma, for example, Salli ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi. Right? So you say, send your peace and blessings upon Muhammad and his family, his people, right? And his sahbihi, his companions, wa atba'ihim, or he says, وَمَنْ تَبِعَهُمْ, and whoever follows them with perfection until the day of resurrection. Now you've included anybody and you've included other people. But it only happened because you started with the Prophet ﷺ. They said that's of course permissible. There's a difference of opinion whether it is permissible to at-ta'yin for a certain individual to say, Allahumma salli ala fulan. Right? And the safest approach is to not do it unless you're including, you're starting with the Prophet ﷺ in the beginning. No. That's the safest approach. Okay? Yeah, did you have?
Doesn't Allah say, هو الذي يصلي عليكم وملائكته?
Yes.
And also there's another correct ayah where someone said, اللهم صل على آل بني أبي أوفى.
Yes. That's after he gave his sadaqah.
Correct.
Yes. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ did it, like we said. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it. هو الذي يصلي عليكم. وَمَلَائِكَتُهُ. So Allah does it, right? And we know aslan when we send it upon the Prophet ﷺ, what happens to us? Every time we send salah upon the Prophet ﷺ, what does happen? 10 will come to us. Yes? Yeah, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Anwar alayhi salam, right?
Yeah, no, as-salam is different.
Alayhi salatu wassalam.
Yes,
Linguistically, I'm not this whatever. Linguistically, I can say Anwar alayhi salatu wassalam.
Linguistically, but not shar'i, not religiously.
Linguistically,
I don't know. But the thing is, we can't separate that because people might understand it and it might be taken as that.
I think there are about 40 million Christian Arabs. So
No. The Christian Arabs, I used to hear him all the time. He used to say Sallili. That same guy used to say Sallili. Now, for a Muslim, this means pray to me. But he used to actually mean it, the linguistic meaning, which is pray for me. Id'ili. Right? It means like make dua for me, but he used to say Sallili. And pray for me. Yeah. Okay. But anyways, going back to this point, yeah, go ahead.
Just very quickly, as I'm trying to think of the Hajj, we mentioned combining as-salat was-salam.
Naam.
He said this is qisas bin Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Yes, that's correct.
You cannot combine the two unless you're talking about the
Yes. And some have included Ibrahim alayhi salam.
Correct.
But outside of those two prophets, I haven't heard it, yani. If you include as-salatu was-salam, this is alayhi salatu was-salam, this is known for being the Prophet sallallahu alone. Sahih.
So you couldn't say it about of course, Isa
No, Isa alayhi salam. But if I say alayhi salatu was-salam, there's no darar because he is a prophet. But it becomes so associated with the Prophet sallallahu that it's kind of jarring to hear that, and it's not laysa ala al-ma'hud. It's not. Not necessarily, no. I wouldn't say inappropriate.
Isn't the reason we say alayhi salam because in Surah Maryam?
He says, Assalamu alayya. But then we say alayhi salam to any prophet. Right? All the prophets, we say alayhi salam. Even if I say it to a person who's not a prophet, by the way. Can I say alayhi salam?
that's what I said.
Alayhi salam, not salatu was salam, but alayhi salam.
Before that, I said Anwar alayhi salam.
Yeah. So if a person, aslan, here's the thing. If a person, let's say, I was with Umar, right, and I come to you and I say, Umar says, Assalamu alaikum. Yusallim alaykum Umar. How do you respond?
Alayhi salam.
Yeah, alaykum alayhi salam, or alayhi salam. Because you're saying, you're replying back, right? In this sense. So from that perspective, it is permissible. But even, let's say, for example, Maryam. Can I say Maryam alayhi salam?
I think I can.
Yeah. La darar, there's no harm. But if I say you have to, there's no dalil. There's no proof where if I say you have to say alayhi salam. You understand this point? Whereas for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? He says, whoever does not send peace and blessings upon him is a bakhil. He's a stingy person. Right?
I think the connotation of alayhi, who is sending the peace, has an importance. When I say, if you tell me that Umar said salam, I say wa alayhi salam, meaning from me to him.
Yeah.
But when we say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, meaning from
Allah, yes.
That requires a dalil in order to say that.
If it's Allah who's sending it, naam, correct. That's a good point. Okay. Good. طيب. Any questions on number 5? It has to be something that we trust religiously. And this is akin to accepting any religious knowledge. Right? The scholars of hadith, do they accept the hadith from anybody? They don't. They verify, who are you? Where did you get it from? Etc., etc. And so we have to do the same thing even with the translators of the Quran. We can't just say, oh, you translated? Good job, hat. You know what I mean? Let's look at it. Yeah, it doesn't work. Because this is our religious knowledge that we're trusting with, right? And so this is why we do have to verify, okay, what's your sources? Where'd you get it from? Who are you? Okay? Makes sense so far? طيب. Here we have a small list of some examples of English translations. So one of the first ones that was done in English, that we still have available widespread, is the one that's done by Marmaduke Pickthall. Okay? He called it the meaning of the glorious Quran. And look at his title. His title is actually very good. And in his introduction, he actually writes the same thing, that there's no possible literal translation of the Quran, and that he will try to be as close to literal as possible, right? But that it's impossible to be. And therefore his translation is of the meanings of the Quran. And this is why he says, it's the meaning of the glorious Quran. He's a convert to Islam in England. Okay, he lived there, he traveled all over the world. He went to India for a little bit, came back. No, he's a convert. And he died, rahimahullah, in England, in London, and he's buried in a cemetery, which ironically, in the same cemetery not far away, Abdullah Yusuf Ali is buried as well. A lot of times they're associated together. They're buried actually very close to each other in the same graveyard in England. Okay? Which brings us to him. Abdullah Yusuf Ali, 1934, 4 years later, came out with his, the Holy Quran translation and commentary. Some pages have a ton of commentary. And his commentary is a lot, and sometimes it's all over the place. There were additions and revisions and whatnot. Many people have mentioned that there are some theological issues with some of the things that he says. So I'm pointing that out, right? There are actually books that are written about some of the problems with Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation. But overall, as a translation, people have used it. It's very widely spread. I think it actually right now is probably the most widely spread, despite the issues that are there with it. Obviously, one of the issues is that he himself comes from a sect, they're called the Bora. The Bora? Is that correct? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? In India? Yes. And they have a certain aqidah, they have a certain belief, and it reflects in his translation as well. Miskin, they said that at the end of his life, he was alone for many years after his wife left him. Even his kids abandoned him. He was homeless for a number of years, even after he published his translation. The year that he died, he was seen wandering on the streets of London. People would take him in, but then he would leave, and he suffered a lot. But then eventually died, and they washed him. They found out that he was a Muslim. They buried him in that same Muslim graveyard. Like we said, he's not too far away from where Pickthall is buried as well. Okay. This is another one, the message of the Quran, and this is by Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad, if anybody knows, his first name is Leopold. Man, I forgot his last name. He's a Jewish convert. He's actually Austro-Hungarian, right? He converted to Islam upon studying Islam, and he actually went to Pakistan. He got Pakistani citizenship. He represented the Pakistani government in a certain number of issues. He went to Mecca for Hajj. He wrote about it. He has a book, it's called Journey to Mecca. There's a documentary out about him. He did a lot of things. His book, The Message of the Quran, is actually pretty beneficial. I haven't read through it, to be honest, that much. But a lot of people have praised the book and some of the things that he says in it. And the fact that he tried to act as a bridge between the East and West, being a convert, especially at such an early age. And the things that he was able to do, and he met a lot of world leaders, and he did a lot of things as well there. Okay? We have a copy of this one, by the way, the Message of the Quran. We have a copy here in the Masjid, a physical copy. I think maybe either one or two. We have this one, the interpretation of the meanings of the Noble Quran. This one is done by Muhammad Muhsin Khan and Muhammad Taqiyuddin Al-Hilali. Both of these did it while they were professors at the University of Medina. This copy is very widely spread because it was pushed by the Saudi government. This is the official translation that they would send out, especially in the 80s and 90s when the Saudi government was doing a lot of printing of books and sending out material. Now so it's not as active, they don't do it as much. Muhammad Muhsin Khan is Afghani and Muhammad Taqiyuddin Al-Hilali is Maghribi, he's Moroccan. So both of them are not natives of English, and this is why if you read it, it's actually very hard to read. And a lot of the, when you read the translation, they put things in parentheses, and the things in parentheses go sometimes for like 2-3 lines. And it completely loses you where you are in the verse, because they tried to clarify some of the meanings, and they don't do it in footnotes, they do it in these parentheticals. And it becomes very difficult to read because of this. But overall, it's an acceptable translation, theologically speaking as well, it's fine. Okay? Another one is called the Holy Quran by Sahih International. This one, we do have copies of it here in the masjid. This one was a translation that's done by 3 American sisters who are converts. All of them converted in the 1970s, okay? And then they moved separately. They didn't know about each other to Saudi Arabia. They learned religion, they learned Arabic while over there. They met while over there. And then somebody pitched the idea that maybe you guys should translate the Quran. Do a translation that actually modern American speakers would understand. And this is why if you read Sahih International, that translation, it's done in American English. And so for American readers, it's actually very easy to read. There's not a lot of parentheses. They use basically a mukhtasar of Tafsir ibn Kathir, a summarized one, and they just base it off of that and in doing their translation. But it's very good. I highly recommend it. And we use it all the time. In a lot of our durus, whenever I'm doing my PowerPoints, I just use theirs. Okay. So, and that's very good. I think that's a source of pride, especially for the sisters, that one of the best translations that's actually out there. Now, it's not perfect. Like we said, there's no translation that is in fact perfect. Even myself, a lot of times I'll see the translation, I'll be like, maybe I would word it a little bit differently and so on and so forth, but overall it's completely acceptable, it's completely fine. But that's a huge blessing that it was actually translated by the sisters, and it's actually very good.
Out of all these, which one is the one?
I mean, what I would recommend personally is that you use multiple translations anyways. You never solely rely, especially if you don't speak the Arabic, never only rely on one translation. This should be a rule, because it'll be always limited. But when you see multiple translations and you can compare them side by side, or you can look at them, this will help you hugely. And this is why if you go to like a website like Quran.com, that one, you can actually select which translations you want to look at. And you can actually see how the difference is in how they're translating the verse. And you can see, okay, I see this one is translated a little bit like this, a little bit like this, and it actually helps you.
See, some of the guys, they put after each ayah, they put different translations.
And this is very helpful. Because a lot of times you can actually see how the meanings are different, how are they different, why are they different, etc. Okay. Good. Yes?
None of those guys is Arabic.
Al-Hilali, he's Maghribi. Yeah. There are some translations that came out of Egypt, Egyptian translators, but they haven't picked up, meaning they're not widespread, especially here in America. They might be in Egypt and so forth. I have seen some of them, but they're, like I said, they're either too new or whatnot. Yeah. These are just examples. These are not, there's at least 23 that I've been able to find different types of translations now.
What about the version that I've seen in, I think most of the set
The Clear Quran, so that one is done by like Al-Furqan Foundation, right? I've heard actually good things about that one. I haven't been able to review it, and I didn't add it to the list just because we don't have enough space as well. But I have heard good things, and we do have that one here in the masjid as well. It's called The Clear Quran, and it's done by Ahmed Vikar. Is that his name?
It's actually a committee of people.
Yeah, so he's one of the main translators, but there's a committee that reviews it. Yeah. So that one is actually pretty good. I heard that it's okay. I haven't reviewed it. I've never read through it, to be honest. But I've heard good things, from a certain number of people now. There are translations that are out there. Has anybody heard of Rashad Khalifa? Huh? Yes. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, he is a mathematician and a computer scientist, and he tried to prove the whole number 19 miracle in the Quran. That's been disproven, of course. He had to delete 2 verses from the Quran at the end of Surah At-Tawbah in order to get his theory to work, which obviously is a travesty. And you're saying these 2 verses are not part of the Quran. A'udhu billah. He did that. He came out with his first translation in 1980 or 81. But eventually he said that he found, according to his mathematical model, that his name was mentioned in the Quran, in the math, which aslan, if you manipulate the numbers enough, you can find anything you want. You know what I mean? In a bunch of random numbers. He said that he found his name in the Quran, in the numbers, and it says that his name, and then it says Rasulullah. He's a Rasul. He's the messenger. And so people, in the beginning he just translated, he just was trying to find this miraculousness, but eventually it led to such an extreme, and this is why extremism is forbidden, subhanAllah, look at what happens. He started out kind of okay, maybe, and then he did his translation, and then he did this mathematical stuff, but then eventually he says that now I'm a messenger. And so people said there can be no prophet after Prophet Muhammad, there can be no messenger. He says, no. The verse says, Khatam al-Nabiyyin. The verse says that he's the seal of the prophets, but he's not the seal of the messengers. He's like, I'm not a prophet, I'm a messenger. You understand now how he's manipulating to such a degree. He says, I'm a messenger and not a prophet. Well, it's like, guess what? Every messenger is a prophet. And no, he rejected that. And he said that his new message was that the English translation that he has is a complete substitute for the Arabic, and we no longer need that. Even though he's Egyptian, he speaks Arabic. He says, I was sent as a messenger to update the Quran into the universal language. A'udhu billah. And then he says, now it's this English one, and then he substitutes the word Islam for submission, and the word Muslim for a submitter. And there's a website that they have, A'udhu billah, that promotes this thing. And actually these people, his followers, even though he died, so he was killed in Arizona, in his little community center that he has in Tucson, Arizona. We went by there, we saw it when we visited Tucson. He had his followers, and they were very active on the internet in the 90s. I know all of this because I found out that a good friend of mine was following this ideology. And so we had to learn about it in order to talk to him and convince him that this is not correct. But unfortunately, they were very loud. You understand what happens when you can have just a handful of individuals, but they're very loud, especially online, and it seems like there's a lot of them, when in fact there's not. But he visited their website a few times and then kept on going, especially, I'm talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, completely influenced by what they said, and then accepted their ideology. Part of their ideology is that the way that we pray is wrong. You're only held accountable for your deeds after the age of 40. There's no hijab for a woman, etc., etc. It has like these bizarre beliefs. If you're only held accountable after the age of 40, what's going to happen to you after 40? Aslan, it's not. You know what I mean? You understand? Hugely problematic. We no longer need the Arabic, etc., etc., etc. And of course, their main thing was, and this is what himself, Rashad Khalifa was calling for, is that we only need the Quran, we don't need the Sunnah. And so he led that whole movement of Al-Quraniyun, the people who are just Quranis, meaning they don't accept any Sunnah whatsoever. But then he himself came up with his own Sunnah, which is hilarious. And if he's a messenger, we tell his followers, he has a sunnah, you guys follow his sunnah. Oh, but we can verify. I'm like, how can you verify? He's dead now. Tell me, what's your chain to him? Have you met him? Have you met somebody that met him? What are you doing? You're getting it from an online source. The online source, somebody through the code can hack it. Khalas, salamat salmak. Your chain of narration is gone. And we've talked to them in so many ways to get them to understand that even what they try to attack Ahl Sunnah on, they themselves can be attacked with. Now, not all of the Quranis, by the way, follow him. This guy, Rashad Khalifa. Just to point this out. He has his own specific followers. Later on, we kept on talking to this brother, until in the end he said, I don't really agree with a lot of what he says, and he's trying, I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that he came back more mainstream, and rejected some of those far out ideas. But unfortunately, those do exist. And that, the primary fitna was that his translation of the Quran is actually pretty good. From the perspective of, it's easy to read, it's done in American English, it's not in this old, difficult to read English, and etc. So it does appeal to a certain audience. Any questions? From the sister's side, from the brother's side. Yes.
Khalifa and his number 19.
Uh-huh.
How many letters in Rahman?
I don't know. You mean the word or the surah?
The word Rahman.
Uh-huh.
How many letters?
5?
How about there's an alif after the end?
Yeah.
How about there's no alif after the end?
Then there's 4.
So, there's confusion about Prophet Khalifa.
Yeah.
He just,
How does he count? Does he add letters? Does he not? I mean, he had to delete 2 verses. Yeah.
Which 2 verses you guys believe?
The last 2 verses of Surah At-Tawbah.
Just a side note in that regard, because a lot of people, even Orientals, Mr. Shaheen,
Yeah.
explain that these 2 last verses are not mutawatir because it was narrated through, I forgot his name, one of the Sahaba only when they brought it to
Yeah.
Yes.
We talked about that. I don't know if you guys remember when we talked about the compilation of the Quran, Jam'ul Quran.
Just so people don't get confused.
Yeah. No, the last 2 verses of Surah At-Tawbah are also one of the verses that, what's his name, Khuzaymah? Uh-huh. He, and the Prophet ﷺ had said that his testimony is equivalent to 2 people. Remember in that incident? And then this is also one of the verses that he brought, which were the last 2 verses of Surah At-Tawbah. Okay? And this is why one of the reasons why it was easy for him to reject them as well. But also he rejected them primarily because of his number 19 issue, where he couldn't get his theory to work unless he deleted these two verses from this surah and whatnot. Okay? Good? But even then, the numerical things, they don't really add much to... the Quran wasn't sent down to be a numerical oddity. It's meant to be followed. It's meant to be applied in our lives, right? It's not meant to be doing something like this. طيب. Any questions or issues or concerns?
Some of the ayat, right, for example, Surah Anbiya, about the origin of the cosmos, like Dukhan and...
Uh-huh. Yes.
Some of the ayat, like for example, the modern knowledge of astrophysics,
Uh-huh.
you can extrapolate, or you can put new word, not extrapolate.
Uh-huh.
That that's how it's analogy to the Big Bang theory.
Uh-huh.
Or the expanding universe, that expanded, and that's like the big crunch.
No.
Actually, that's what he's saying.
Uh-huh.
That they're going to collapse the way.
No.
These things, if you say that these are the light of knowledge that we have from astrophysics, if we point it, are we doing mistake? Are we, pointing that Allah said those things?
Good question. So, did you guys hear his point? His question? His question is, let's say, for example, I'm reading in Surah Al-Anbiya, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts talking about the creation of the universe, and how like the heavens and the earth were dukhan, or how they were كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, they were one, and then we separated them, or the expansion of the universe, or the big crunch, all these things, that can be understood in light of modern science, right? Is it wrong to quote them or to bring light to these verses? For example, like in our da'wah, is that your question as well?
Yeah, and then also Quran challenges human intellect again and again.
Yes. Yes.
On this natural event.
Yes.
Like ulul albab.
The intellect. Yes.
Intellect,
Very good.
Human intellect.
So there's a way to address this, right? Usually people call these what? They call them the scientific miracles of the Quran.
But some say scientific indications.
Exactly. So the better word to use is scientific indications in the Quran. Because and so here's the question, and I'm asking this in order for us to actually think about this. What's the difference between if I use the word indication or miracle? What's the implication if I say it's a scientific miracle? How can that be problematic?
Quran is a miracle itself.
The Quran is a miracle. So a miracle is something that can't be proven by science. It is an oxymoron. You understand this point? Because the miraculous thing is that we can't explain it by science, but now we're saying that science itself is a miracle, right? No. So using the word miracle can be problematic. Also, a miracle, by definition, can anybody question that it's a miracle? No. If it's a miracle, it's clear. It's like, wow, that was miraculous. Everybody agrees. And everybody who sees it would be like, okay, that's a miracle, khalas. Like the miracle of the staff of Musa alayhi salam when he throws it. Even the magicians, they were like, no, khalas, that's a miracle. Amanna, we believe. They prostrate. Exactly. So the miracle compels the people to not reject what they saw. You can't. When Allah raises the mountain above the heads of Bani Israel, right, they can't, that's a miracle. So many, these types of things definitely without a doubt are miracles, right? With regards to these scientific things in the Quran, using that word miracle becomes problematic because there's no comparison between these two. But what we can say is that it's part of the miraculous nature of the Quran, and here's where the Quran actually is miraculous, in that the language of the Quran, this is what we call the multi-layer, what is it called? Man, Sheikh Fahd uses it. He uses this word a lot. It says multi-layered, multifaceted approach. Okay? Because we have to look at the Quran in a multi-layered way, in a multifaceted approach. In that its miracle is that the Quran is a book for all times and all ages. And so its language can accommodate a 7th century Arab who doesn't know anything about the expansion of the universe. And it can accommodate a 21st century man who does understand the expansion of the universe and can see how this verse, perhaps, we can't definitively ever say this, perhaps does accommodate that as well. Because I can't definitively say, no, this verse is talking about Einstein's theory of the expansion of the universe. Which, by the way, Einstein also didn't come up with. Einstein, he actually believed in the, model, not the Big Bang. He had a problem with the Big Bang theory. And the Big Bang also came out afterwards. He believed in the, the theory that predated the Big Bang. Does anybody know the theory? It's where the constant, and the universe is always there. And this is what Einstein believed. He believed that the universe was always there. It doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end. Yeah, but it has a name in physics. I think it's the constant model or the constant world or the constant universe. I know it's not related to it. But anyways, that's what actually Einstein believed in. And that was the standard in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. In physics, this was the standard. Now, if that's the standard, most mainstream physicists accepted that theory. For us as Muslims, this is problematic. And guess who accepted it hugely? Who loved the idea of the constant universe? The Russians. At the time, they were the Soviets. They loved this theory. Why did they love this theory? Exactly. Because it says, if the universe is always there, we don't need a God. Because it doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have a creator. You understand the problem? And so they loved this theory. And they promoted it, they paid money to their scientists to even do more research to further prove this point. And for Muslims at the time, it was a big fitna, because the Quran clearly states that the heavens and the earth have a beginning. And now science is telling us no. But not all scientists, like I said, the majority, the mainstream scientists did. There were a few scientists here and there that you can go back and you can look who did say, no, according to mine, it's not constant. There's a beginning. Slowly it shifted in the 1950s up until the 1960s when the Big Bang Theory actually became the standard and the majority of physicists moved over. Who didn't move over? The Soviets. Which shows you, they didn't. It shows you that, and a lot of people say that science is unbiased. Scientists themselves are not biased. They follow the dalil, they follow the proof, right? The scientific whatever. But this actually shows you that the Soviet scientists did not budge. Even in front of this, which tells us that aslan science can only be as unbiased as the scientist who's telling you what that science is. And a lot of times we confuse two things. We confuse what a scientist says for what science is. Just because a scientist says something doesn't make it part of science. Right? The same thing applies to a sheikh. Just because a sheikh said it doesn't mean that it's, you know what I mean, correct. It's halal or haram. Because he's a human being. His words can be rejected. Unless it's Quran or Sunnah, no. Right? And so the Quran and Sunnah are what we observe. And in their sense, what they observe, we cannot observe the beginning of the universe. We have to extrapolate and look at other things and whatnot. And so the Soviets actually rejected the Big Bang Theory for a very long time.
They also rejected, you know what? Genetics and environment. Your genes and nature versus nurture.
Uh-huh.
They took only nurture. They say there is nothing called nature. No
Really?
They believe, they say.
So nurture only, but they said there's no nature.
They proved it. They had a huge greenhouse in Siberia.
Uh-huh.
And they grew wheat by modifying that environment.
Uh-huh.
So look, this environment is everything. So that's why they're way behind in the, in agriculture and genetic technology.
Yeah.
So that time.
Nature versus nurture. They said nurture, it's only nurture, it's not nature.
They executed all the scientists who say.
Wow. They did execute scientists, yeah. But then this happened in almost every oppressive regime, that they would execute scientists who didn't follow along with what they wanted them to say. Good. But you understand now this point. So going back to the science, we can't use that word scientific miracle. We can say that, look, this is one of the meanings of this verse, right, is that it could possibly say that it's talking about the expansion of the universe. Yeah, that's not a problem.
For example,
Because it accommodates that. The beauty of the Arabic, and this is going back to the Arabic language, the beauty of the Arabic language is that one word can mean multitudes of things. And so one of the things that it could definitely mean is 1, 2, and 3. Right? But there were certain things, like for example, somebody mentioned, it's one of the scientific miracles in the Quran is where Allah says, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. And we made from water every living thing. This, though, isn't a modern scientific discovery. People knew this from thousands of years ago, that without water no life can exist. So we can't say, this is a scientific miracle or something along those lines, because people knew this from a very long time ago. And a lot of times I think we give ourselves too much credit to what modern science has found out versus what they also knew from a long time ago. You all know the picture of the ape that eventually evolves into a human being, right? That 5-step picture. The editor of Science, the Science Journal Science, he said this is the biggest misconception in evolution, because it's actually not how it works. We didn't evolve from apes, because actually now their theory is actually pointing to a common ape-human ancestor. That humans didn't actually come from apes, they came from a common ancestor with apes that they then branched off from, etc. So that is problematic aslan in and of itself. But that picture didn't start with Darwin. No, who started that picture? Of the ape that eventually evolves into a human being. They found it in a Hindu temple that dates back to 2,600 years ago, where Hindus living in India had that idea that apes are so similar to human beings, we might have evolved from them. The idea also of evolution is not a new one. It's a very old one. And they said that a lot of scientists like Darwin was actually at the very end of evolutionary scientists. But he's the most famous because of his claims and whatnot. His claims were the mechanism, which is natural selection, and the origin, which is the tree of life, where before that nobody had the idea of the tree of life. Yeah. But you guys understand this, that picture is actually found in a Hindu temple, and it dates back 2,600 years ago. So it's not a new thing. Exactly. Watching them in their behavior and their interaction and whatnot. No. Okay.
How about this one? It's the kahf.
Uh-huh.
The slippers. See, Allah is turning them.
Uh-huh.
Turning them.
Uh-huh. Yes. وَنُقَلِّبُهُمْ ذَاتَ الْيَمِينِ وَذَاتَ الشِّمَالِ. نعم.
Now they found that, if you have quadriplegic or people like that,
Uh-huh.
old people who just sleep.
They have to keep on moving them.
Yeah, they move them because
Yes. They get bed sores and they get bruises. Naam.
See, Allah is turning
Yes. Right, exactly. And so this is, can we say that this is a miracle? it's hard to say that it's a mirror, but it's easy to say, like, look, this is actually something that it's referring to. Here's one of the points though. Using it for da'wah purposes as a primary tool can be dangerous. Because then people will find other things that people have claimed and they'll be like, okay, look at this is a problem in the Quran. Like I remember there was a debate that I watched and the sheikh just got, I felt bad for that sheikh because he had no answer. And the guy, this was an atheist Egyptian against an Egyptian scholar. I had never heard of this scholar before, so it could have been staged that he also wasn't a sheikh. But then I looked him up later and he actually is, right? But a lot of times they actually do this, by the way. I don't know if you guys realize this. They have, and these people have been exposed, alhamdulillah, but they continue to bring new ones. There are people who appear on TV stations as religious figures, but they're in fact not religious figures at all. They are paid to promote misconceptions about Islam and to further them. And to tell people this is wrong, this is this, and they give completely bogus fatwa and whatnot. This is very common in the Middle East, and this is why you have to be very, very careful, especially where you take your knowledge from. Right? This is, alhamdulillah, because a lot of people don't speak Arabic here. That hasn't been a problem. But if you do speak like another native language, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I get forwarded videos all the time like, Sheikh, look at this other Sheikh. I'm like, this isn't a Sheikh. And I'm not a Sheikh, but this isn't a Sheikh, definitely. You know what I mean? Because he's saying this. Okay? This is problematic. What did that atheist guy say? The atheist guy said in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah says, فَوَجَدَهَا تَغْرُبُ فِي عَيْنٍ حَمِئَةٍ, that he found the sun to set in عَيْنٍ حَمِئَةٍ. Ayn, it's like an eye, or like it could be an eye of water, a well or some sort of natural spring. Hamia, you know what I mean? You can muddy, murky, boiling, whatever. There's a different and he said that the sun is setting there. So the guy is saying, look, you say science is in the Quran, interpret this to me scientifically. Sheikh was stuck. He got stuck. Yeah, he didn't know. I had to look up, I was like, that's a good point. Let me look this up. And then it was very easy. Because it says, فَوَجَدَهَا. Wajadaha, that means he found it. That means that this was how it appeared to him, not the reality of actually what was happening. You see the difference there? Now?
Even linguistically, Sheikh, the Arabs say the moon is just got hid behind the mountain.
Yeah.
Linguistically, it's
Linguistically, they use these expressions, but it's not the reality of it, but it's the beauty of the thing. But he says, فَوَجَدَهَا. This is easy, and he says, he found it. This is how it appeared to him, but that doesn't mean that it's the reality. And this is true.
And this is describing the East.
Exactly. He's saying that this is how I saw it. Khalas, that's it. What's the problem there? It's not a problem. That's not the reality of the situation. But then he said, okay, I'll bring you another problem. In your hadith, he says that the Prophet ﷺ says that every day the sun sets, the sun when it goes away, it goes and prostrates in front of the throne of Allah. And then it comes back. This is a correct hadith. This is a correct hadith. We can't deny the hadith. This is correct.
So this is following Allah's command. And not
Exactly. What is its sujood? Do I understand its sujood? Allah says, وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُم. Allah says in the Quran, there's no way for you to understand how they do tasbih. So how am I going to understand how it does sujood? I don't know. Its sujood isn't clear to me. But I do know that it does sujood.
Allah said the rules and it's following the rules.
Of course. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. Now. Yeah. Were you going to say something else?
أبو بكر الصديق رضي الله عنه قال العجز عن الإدراك إدراك في ذات الله إشراك lacking of knowledge is a knowledge.
Is knowledge. Because at least you know that you're lacking something. Yeah.
You don't know, you know. You don't know.
Yeah. Now.
just back to the numbers in the Quran.
Naam.
One of the best interpretations I found with Gary Miller, he mentions that there are certain things in the Quran, such as the word month by itself. It's mentioned 12 times. The word yom by itself is mentioned 365 times, for example. So he connotates on that. And he says,
You know, but I've done research on this and I found it to be different.
Sure, we might be. I'll give you another explanation. For example,
Yeah.
because every time Allah says something is equivalent to something,
Yeah. It is equivalent. Now.
it's absolutely equivalent.
Yeah.
For example, he says every time Allah says, and when they ask you, and then the word qul, are matching exactly the same amount of numbers.
Uh-huh.
So his point is, when we look at the whole Quran as a whole,
Yes.
it's a reflection that the Quran has been preserved as a whole.
Yes.
You see my
Yeah.
point?
No, you're definitely right.
There's no verse that have missed that could make those numbers go off.
Yes. No, and that's a good point, yani, to make, is that there aren't any inconsistencies in the Quran. When he says that they are equivalent, they are. I don't know. I myself, I was forwarded, some of those WhatsApp messages. A lot of them, somebody sent me his the number of months in the Quran, the number of days, the number of some other stuff that they kept on sending, like the ratio of water to earth and the ratio of whatever, all these things. And you have an app, the beautiful thing is that now we have apps where you can search the Quran. So I searched it, I put in those words, and I searched, I put in the word month. It came up 17 times. I was like,
there are only 12 that it is mentioned, Sheikh, without any connection by the word month by itself.
by itself? Okay, I'll look at that one. Yeah, and the word day, I don't know if it's 365 because I found there were.
Cannot be 365 because when Allah says days, Allah is talking about lunar year.
355
This
or 54.
It's not hours. It's the,
Naam.
So we talk about the lunar.
No, but for example, like the one in Surah Al-Kahf.
54.
Well, the one in Surah Al-Kahf says وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا تِسْعًا. Yeah, 300 is the solar, and 309 is the lunar. Naam.
So just multiply 309 times 354 and divide by 365. The exact number.
Okay, inshallah ta'ala. خلاص, we'll stop here, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khairan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا نستغفرك ونتوب إليك, and we'll have somebody do the adhan inshallah ta'ala.